The 22nd of April 1962, Charles de Gaulle, the French Second World War leader and the president, left Paris to board the presidential plane. He arrived at a crossroads at 8:20 p.m, but then 12 assassins jumped out and they emptied their automatic weapons at the cars. 187 rounds were fired by the commando and 14 bullets hit de Gaulle's vehicle. But the hunt was on for the men who carried out the assassination attempt. The Petit Clamart attack, or Operation Charlotte Corday, was organised by Jean Bastien Thiry, and he became written into the history books for his attack that injured one person, but he is also remembered for being the last person inside of France who was executed by a firing squad inside the nation, around 7 months after his attempt upon de Gaulle's life. But why did he carry out this plot, and what happened with his execution? Jean-Marie Bastien Thiry was born on the 19th of October 1927, and his father was known to Charles de Gaulle, and they had been comrades together in a political party. Jean attended university, and he became a member of the French Air Force, and was involved in designing air-to-air missiles. He was a military aircraft engineer, and received promotion, and was very well thought of. However, his political ideas were becoming rather dissident and different. He was even a lieutenant colonel, but Thiry began to become dissented to Charles de Gaulle, the French president. Specifically, he did not like de Gaulle's plans for Algeria. The French for over a century had considered French Algeria part of the nation, but the French did not grant voting rights to the Muslim population of the country. The country also had a large number of Algerian-born Europeans who controlled the politics of the nation. But de Gaulle would support Algerian independence, and Bastien Thiry did not agree with this, and he began to become an opponent of de Gaulle because of this. Thiry then began to get involved in different paramilitary groups, and it's believed that he became involved with the OAS, the Organisation Armée Secrète, who were also opposed to de Gaulle's policies, and he also may have reached out to the National Liberation Front. He allegedly tried to contact these, but then along with a number of other dissenters, they made preparations in the Paris region of Petit Clamart, and they began to consider how they could carry out an assassination plot and attempt on Charles de Gaulle's life. As mentioned, de Gaulle's car and motorcade would, on the 22nd of August 1962, head from the Élysée Palace to an airbase, and they travelled to the crossroads at the Rue du Bois and the Rue Charles de Brie. Parked roughly 300 metres away, before the Petit Clamart roundabout, was the Thiry Commando, 12 members or dissidents who were all anti-communist, and the group planned to assassinate de Gaulle, and to avenge different crimes which had been carried out in French Algeria. Thiry was hidden in a car, and he then ordered his men to fire their weapons at de Gaulle's motorcade when it went past. With submachine guns and other weapons, the group shot and shot, aiming almost 190 rounds at the car, and there were 14 hits, and one of these came close to de Gaulle and embedded into the backrest of the front passenger seat in the vehicle. The assassins had missed their target, and when de Gaulle got to the airbase, he claimed this time it was close, and also told his wife that she was very brave. But the hunt was on for those who carried out the attack, and after 2 weeks 15 suspects were seized, and the final arrest was that of Jean Bastien Thiry, who was lifted from his home. His trial took place at the fort of Vincennes, and during this he appeared alongside the other commando members. He claimed that the death of de Gaulle would have been justification for the genocide of those inside of Algeria, and stated that other conspirators were planning to assassinate the head of state. But he tried to make out that he was trying to capture de Gaulle and not kill him, taking him into his custody so he could then take him to a judge and have him tried as a criminal or even a despot. Thiry claimed, "We have exercised the right of self-defence against a man, in the name of his victims, in the name of our fellow citizens, and in the name of our children. This man is dripping with French blood, and he represents the current shame of France. It is not good, it is not moral, it's not legal for this man to remain long the head of France. Morality, law, and human reason unite to condemn him. The truth that we have spoken, and that many others have spoken before us, will remain attached to the name of this man, wherever he goes and whatever he does. One day this man will account for his crimes, before God, if not before men." Thiry had been deemed fit to stand trial, despite the fact he had a long history of bad clinical depression, and he was sentenced to death for his crimes. De Gaulle could have pardoned him, but he did commute the death sentence of those who had fired shots at him, but he refused to spare Bastien Thiry. De Gaulle later claimed 5 reasons that he would not spare him. He said of these: 1. Bastien Thiry had directed his subordinates to fire on a car which there was an innocent woman present, de Gaulle's wife. 2. He had endangered civilians, namely the Fillon family, who had been travelling in a car near to the one carrying de Gaulle. 3. He had brought foreigners, specifically 3 Hungarians, into the plot. 4. During his trial, he claimed that he had not intended to kill de Gaulle, but rather to kidnap him. Asked how he intended to confine the president, Bastien Thiry replied, "We would have just taken away his spectacles and braces." His defence lawyer was heard to mutter, "He's just signed his own death warrant," as it was much anticipated that whilst de Gaulle might have pardoned an assassin, he would not pardon an assassin who publicly mocked him. 5. Finally, and most seriously in de Gaulle's eyes, while the other conspirators performed the actual firing and had thus placed themselves in some danger, Bastien Thiry had only directed events from afar, acting as a lookout for the gunmen. But there was a growing threat inside of France that Bastien Thiry would be saved from his fate, and that people would actually break him out of prison. Because of this, there was a huge security operation to take him to the site of his execution, and around 2,000 policemen lined the route, and 35 vehicles kept an eye on the route. There was actually a plot to break him out, but Bastien Thiry made it to the site of his execution. He was executed a week after his trial took place. On the 11th of March 1963, the 35-year-old former aircraft missile engineer was taken out to a firing range at Fort d'Ivry, and there was a firing squad gathered for him. He was stood opposite them, next to an embankment where a chair had been prepared for him to be secured to. The firing squad were ordered to ready themselves, and they raised their rifles towards their target. Thiry had refused a blindfold, and he clutched in his hand a rosary. They took aim, and the commander of the firing squad then gave the order to fire. They shot straight into their target, and immediately Jean Bastien Thiry was executed. Jean Bastien Thiry was the final person inside of France to be executed by a firing squad. Charles de Gaulle, his target, later said about him that the French need martyrs, they must choose them carefully. I could have given them one of those idiotic generals playing ball in the Toulon prison. I gave them Bastien Thiry. They'll be able to make a martyr of him. He deserves it. Rather strange and damning words from a man who was the target of Thiry's assassination plot. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.